Well, good morning, Providence family. Today is Tuesday, and it's the Tuesday in Holy Week. And on this Holy Week, we're doing something a little different with our devotions. As Bob mentioned yesterday, we're going to be walking through the 7 final words of Jesus, these words that Jesus speaks on the cross, and offering just short reflections on what those sayings and what these words mean to us as Jesus followers and disciples of Jesus today. Before we get into that second saying of Jesus, the words of Jesus, I should say, just quickly I want to just share a little bit about where I am sitting in the sanctuary. I'm in the sanctuary. Probably most of us are aware there's a cross that sits on the north side of the sanctuary. And I don't know how many of you have actually walked up or were here when this was put up originally, but this cross was actually made for a Good Friday service. It was made out of old barn wood, and the gentleman where we got the wood, I believe, donated the wood when he found out it was going to be made into a cross. And then these stones that are at the base of the cross, on these stones are written different words. And I think there were 2 different Good Friday services where we used stones. And we wrote on these stones burdens that we carry as people, as Christ followers, things like condemnation and shame and fear and betrayal, suffering, sorrow, pride, and all of these things that we carry as burdens. During a Good Friday service, we brought them up and placed them at the foot of the cross. And so this has continued to be a reminder to us in our worship space that this is something we continue to do. We bring these burdens, we lay them at the foot of the cross because God and Jesus can carry these more than we can. And so it's a cool reminder. And so once we are able to worship again, feel free to come and observe and check it out. There's also a prayer journal. I don't think you can see that right now, but there's a prayer journal, so you can come on a Wednesday morning and pray and write those prayers. So anyway, I just share that because this is a fitting place to do this series of walking through the final 7 words of Jesus, which is why we're doing just that. But this morning, or this afternoon, if you're watching this later in the day, we're looking at the second of these words of Jesus. These are the words that Jesus speaks on the cross. He says, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." Wow. I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. I think it's helpful for us to remember the context in which Jesus is saying these words, particularly who he is saying these words to. Many of us are familiar with the story. Jesus, of course, he's on the cross. He is suffering. He is in agony beyond what we can put into words or even imagine. Jesus hanging on a cross. And near Jesus, there are at least 2 criminals also suffering and hanging on a cross. This is from Luke's gospel. Luke tells us that one of those 2 criminals turns to Jesus, mocks him, insults him, and says, "If you're the Messiah," which I don't think he actually believes Jesus is the Messiah, "save yourself and save us." He turns to Jesus in his suffering, his final moments, and he mocks Jesus, saying, "If you really are the Messiah, save us and save yourself." There's another criminal, though, who turns to that criminal and rebukes him and says, "Do you have no fear for God? We're hanging on this cross," he says, and we're getting the punishment that we deserve. We are paying the penalty for the crimes we've committed. And yet this man, this Jesus is hanging, he is an innocent man. He's done nothing wrong. And then he turns to Jesus and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." A pretty simple ask, just remember me. And then Jesus in this moment says the most incredible words one could hear in this moment of suffering, in their final moments here on earth. "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." what these words tell us is the Jesus way that we've been studying. The Jesus way leads to life, even in the face of death. The Jesus way leads to life. Most obviously and most profoundly, this tells us about our eternal salvation. Jesus' words here remind us that and reaffirm to us that heaven is a real place. Remind us that Jesus Christ is preparing a place for each of us who he calls his own. And it is a place that we will dwell with Jesus for eternity. And it's a place that Jesus rightfully calls, of course, paradise. It is paradise. It is beyond what we can put into words or even fathom. And it is a promise. It is a gift that we receive the very day that we leave this earth. Now, there's a lot we don't understand. But Jesus' words remind us that, yes, heaven is real and heaven is a place that we enter into when we die. That's first and foremost. And yet I think this passage and these words also tell us something else. That the Jesus way leads to life, even in the face of death, even when we die. But the Jesus way leads to life even in the face of death. Just reflecting on this passage this morning, there's two criminals in this story, right? One criminal holds on to his old ways, right? He holds on to the ways of a criminal. He's inward focused, he's selfish, he's mocking and insulting to the very end. And what does that lead to? Just more suffering and death. But there's a second criminal, and Luke tells us in his gospel. This criminal acknowledges a fear of God. This criminal repents of his ways. We see a man who has been changed in his words. He repents of his own sin, admits his guilt and his deserving of punishment, and then turns to Jesus and simply says, "Remember me." And what does he receive? Of course, he receives the ultimate gift, which is salvation in eternity with Jesus Christ, the greatest gift we can receive. But even before that, he receives the gift of God's grace and the gift of God's comfort, even in the face of his own death. The Jesus way leads to life, even in the face of death. Yes, eternity, which is the greatest gift, but also in the face and in the midst of our suffering, the Jesus way leads to life, grace, comfort. And here's the reality. All of us, varying degrees, are facing or experiencing some kind of death, some kind of loss because of this coronavirus, right? And what Jesus' words tell us, of course, most importantly, that no matter what happens here on earth, our eternity is secure with Jesus Christ. Yes. But what Jesus' words also remind us is that even in the face of suffering and loss, and many of us are experiencing suffering and loss, as we turn to Jesus, there is grace, there is life, there is comfort, and there is hope. And Providence family, I hope and I pray that each of us are experiencing this life, even in the face of what feels like death. And my prayer and my hope for us is that this time will compel us, I don't know if that's the right word, to be like that second criminal, to repent of the areas we've been off, and turn to Jesus, because what Jesus has to offer is greater than all the things that this world has to offer, including the things that we have lost and are losing. And so as kind of just a way to end this time, Pastor Bob and I had some time of prayer and worship this morning, and one of the songs struck me that we sang, and I want to just sing that and offer that as a prayer. Give me Jesus, and words that are hard, and yet words that are true. And so if you know these words, feel free to sing along, or listen to what the Spirit might be ministering to your heart. When I rise in the morning, when I rise in the morning, when I rise, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. When I am alone, oh, when I am alone, oh, when I am alone, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. When I come to die, oh, when I come to die, oh, when I come to die, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. You can have all this world. You can have